The last voyage of a dead nation. The Carthaginian naval mourning ritual. In Antioch, the day was normal. The navy men were loading cargo and supplies into ships, unloading precious commodities or goods that were imported or brought to be sold. But this day was different. Off the coast, a bundle of ships arrived bearing a familiar yet distinct flag. Distant flag. The Carthaginian flag. They eventually reached the port, but right before docking, they gave one final salute to their nation. One last note that it existed. They repeated repairs. That's what they have written down. I don't know if it's real. But I'm just gonna say repeated. They repeated 5 times. What they wrote was the name Figia III, the now successor of Carthaginian nobility and statehood. And they roared a 6th time, but this time it was different, less of a chant, more of a sentence. What was said was, Carthagia shall return. Then they docked and sold their ships, but kept the flags. The Carthaginian flags that were kept served as capes of proof that their lineage is descendants of Carthagia and its noble standing before its final fall. Carthaginian ships arrive in Antioch. They are the last remains of an empire lost to time. This is the before shot. People were unloading cargo, as I said, and this is the after shot. Everyone turned attention to the Carthaginian navy pulling up, and the mass amount of ships that they had came very much in handy. But yeah, let's get into the video. Welcome to another video, and today we're looking at what is essentially start over 2 human scenario. Now, last video we saw a lot happen. Carthagia fell. This episode we saw that ships have finally arrived in Antioch, and not only that, but the plague has pulled back from southern Europe, but is still in the southern parts of France and northern parts of Italy. But other than that, welcome to the human scenario. Hope you liked the video, and if you do, please hit that like button and subscribe button. Those will help me out a lot. Let's get into this video. Basically, after all this, the Atlas nation didn't really move. The Berbers decided to start the move, and the Moroccans were basically fighting a war, so they couldn't really much move or do a lot. But quickly we see that the Fijian relatives of old Phrygia, Fijian nobility, will quickly take over a large piece of territory due west and east of the nation that they have established, and they quickly establish relations with their compatriot nations, although large chunks of land are quickly seized from the nations over here, which is kind of sad, but I'm gonna keep that just as a reminder. And we also see that the Atlas people will quickly form themselves a very nice country, by the way, and will quickly start to do much more than that, being that they will start a move towards the north. Basically, actually not the north, but the south. And we quickly see that their efforts are paid off in the form of blood, because a lot of people die. And we see that Morocco takes the rest because, well, they gonna need it, as they at this point aren't on the back foot anymore, but they're still in a dire spot where they need to cut off a few troops. There we go. And at this point they're already very much down south, as you can see. They followed the areas over here. They couldn't take these 2 villages. But after taking so much and getting eventually so close to the capital, Southern Morocco fell, and we quickly see that the nation would be assimilated into the full Moroccan nation. And we quickly see that war would be declared over the territories that Morocco would have laid claim to. Mostly the northern Moroccan regions, because they really wanted to retake the silver rebellions all territories. Although due to the Atlas mountain range, they wouldn't be able to do all of the mountain stuff. They would be able to use the hilly terrain that they have a bit back at the desert areas as an advantage to train their troops a bit more. Over here we see that Moroccan troops would eventually push out our Atlas troops, and we quickly see that the Atlas troops will be overwhelmed, and even though they are very good at fighting, they are not that good at defending, so yeah. But the Moroccans make themselves a quite large nation, and they start to do so a bit even more, because at this point they are just as expansionist as Carthagena was. Not to make any notes here, but Carthagena was twice as expansionist than even Italos is. So that's kind of giving you vibes of who these guys are. And we quickly see that they make quite a large move by going south, eventually taking over a large piece of territory, which is very important. But eventually, even once they reach the southern areas, they stop because they get news. The Atlas people have gotten news of their eastern areas being annexed by not only the Berbers, but also the northern areas being annexed by the new Carthaginians. And the Moroccans are worried about the new Carthaginians because they don't want them to regain the power. Although over here we see that a few Fijian relative people quickly start to reform a bit of a pocket of survival, trying to have the nation survive in some form or some way. These are known as the Old Carthaginians, and eventually they would be successful in taking control of the region over here, making their own little pocket nation. This nation will quickly make itself pretty much the nation's only base of operations. Would be able to do so out of a lot of things, and basically their idea was here that okay, these guys are basically our predecessors, we should help them, which was a good idea, not gonna lie. But eventually that would cause a few problems. And going a bit down the line here, but a lot of nations haven't recovered from the thing. But one that hasn't fully recovered is Polgoskaya. And we quickly see that due to that and a bit of plague still remaining in the country, the Ankarans are able to destroy them in the field. Although over here near this town they do put up a decent fight, eventually it's so futile that the southern areas just give up and surrender. These areas are also taken, although not fully, and we quickly see that all food is cut off, or access to the outside world is cut off, and eventually Polgoskaya falls, and we see that Polgoskaya becomes very important for one very important reason. It's in the middle of some trade routes. Yes, in the middle of some that are going to be made in a few years. Yeah, this guy was like, the Ankarans were ready for a lot of things. They just weren't ready for the timeline to be so goddamn bad. Like, you made the nation for basically no reason except for future borders. And eventually they also did a few things here, which was they cut some slack for the Polgoskans, and they gave them only one nation that would be still under their rule, and this would be a very very small nation that only would be able to declare war if it had the permission from Ankara to do so. And this was a play on Ankara's part to gain more influence and more power, and seem more powerful to any outside attacker that would be attacker basically. And eventually Faisal saw this and was like, yo, let's create the Faisalic League, huh? Could work out. And then they were promptly invaded because of that suggestion, because these guys were like, oh, the Faisalic League, awesome, it's going to be our union now, and we're gonna make it the federation soon. So how about we just invade you, take a bit of the territories we want, and you just shut up and allow us to do this. Now the Faisals did originally think that this was going to end really quickly, they were going to win and all of that, but eventually they fell. And basically what the main problem now was that they would only have a small piece of the territory, and the rest of it would go over to them. And one by one, the Faisalic Empire would be reunited in some parts or some ways. And they would even go after this Bulgarskoyan nation, which would be totally ignored by the Ankarans, who showed that they don't really care about any conflicts that happen to their vassal over here. As long as they don't get attacked, they're fine. And the Faisals were ready to do this at any point. And at some point they even took over the capital over here and demanded some territory over here, which would be granted to them, but we quickly see that the territories that they wanted were basically menial and only had a bit of land. Now for Montenegro just gifted them a piece of land over here, which kind of was okay, but what these guys really wanted was the this area over here, which would have been a very good thing to launch an attack on Ankara from. But as you can see, Ankara has a lot of allies and is in an alliance with Mesopotamia. Speaking of Mesopotamia, basically they are no longer Mesoa, they're the Grand Empire of Mesoa. So yeah, but everyone just calls them Mesoa because they really don't want to call them by that name. Even the people don't call it by that name. And the one who said to call it by that name was a general who was very arrogant, and he would be later on relieved of his duties as a general, which was a pain in the ass for him. And eventually we see that the Mesoans pushing all the way over here, and this war over here being reaching a stalemate after basically what happened was this guy fell. These guys took over most of these eastern areas and couldn't get any closer to the capital, so they just went after the desert regions because nobody really wanted them. And then the unthinkable happened, and this rebellion eventually had the courage to attack them, which would eventually lead to the Armenians being forced to give over some territories due to a counteroffensive done by the rebels, which would be returned and taken back. But we quickly see that their offensive was not for anything but for glorious peace treaties, as they knew that one more push and counter push would be enough to make the Armenians reconsider their whole thing. And eventually the south was forced to rejoin the Armenians, although these guys were giving a bit more autonomy. Eventually the Catholic Empire war kinda died down, but for the next few years they would be plagued by instability and a few rebellions. the most likely being the separation rebellion, which would be this Cyan one, which would very much love to separate itself from Qatarik, but Qatarik doesn't really want to allow that, so yeah. Also, Raqqa joined this because they were like, yo, you sent only 32k to us while we were being humbled by around 80k, and our people were, yes, evacuated, but the Marquis family is devastated. This is just bad. And nobody really cared. And the Qatariks were like, yo, rebellion, take these territories. The rebellion was like, okay, I'm gonna take these. Then it took a bit more. The Qatariks didn't really care because they thought, oh, those land must have been also very impotent to us, so they just took them. And we quickly see it's actually because these two are working together to bring down Qatarik. I know that the rebellion was helped by Qatarik, but the Qatarik nobles kinda angered these guys over here, so it was very weird how the relationships went during the war, but since they were forced to be allies, the guys needed help, and the Qatariks came at a convenient time, so they were like in the depth for the war. But eventually, we see that the capital would have to see many pockets of separatists trying to make their own nation, and quickly the great separatist Qatarik war would take place. Qatarik would try and take as many settlements as possible, even taking that town, and also pushing down south to take the main areas over here, trying to at least take these and take as much land as possible. But the leaders just went underground and into the deserts, which was a solid strategy actually. And over here, the guerrilla tactics that were used kind of slowed down the Qatarik army, so they had to like pull back from the region. Over here, it was kind of a bloodbath. Two of the villages were burned down, and the last one was just taken without much of a problem. That is. And over here we see that the forces managed to take the city over there, which was more inclined to the rebellion that initially fought. And once they reached over here, rebellion forces just swept the areas over here and took these back. And eventually Qatarik would see itself in a downward spiral. And I say conflict, the age of conflict, for a reason. The conflicts in this world are getting a bit too much. Messoa is on the brink of probably collapsing. It's in its southern parts. Over in the north, it's still wealthy, still able to exist. In the south, it's just meaningless expansion that is going on there. And for the Yemens over here, we see that the first one to move is this guy, who makes a quick move over here. But while this guy was moving, it got news of the rebellion wanting to move into some territories over here. So it led them, and didn't think they would take most of the south just to take a retaliatory strike against the Qatariks. And we quickly see that the retaliatory strike did quite well, as forces were needed to be recalled from some certain areas. And some people were like, yo, why not just join these guys if we're already being abandoned? And that's what happened. And eventually the entire south was against the Qatariks empire. And we quickly see that in the south, Qatarik forces would be forced out. Most in the central regions would just give up. They didn't want to fight their own people. And we quickly see that eventually this actually caused the Qatariks to lose a large amount of ground. The separatists were very strong, and eventually it was like very impossible to hold the separatists down. And eventually, when the capital fell, two governing bodies kinda came out of it. and the first one was the capital, and some of its loyalists who decided to put son of the old king on the throne, and decided to just crown him the new king, which was a bit of a weird decision by them, considering they fought against their own king, but yeah. And the rest just joined the rebellion over here, and this would be known as a great betrayal by a lot, but most of this land would actually claim to be a part of the puppet, or part of this nation, which wouldn't be true. They wouldn't be able to hold on to this, but eventually these guys were like, you know what, fuck it, we're just gonna take these areas over. It's gonna be like, alright. And eventually, it turned out to not be alright, as a lot of people just got mad and did a lot of stuff. But we see that over here, Phrygia, the third son, the third lineage, Phrygia the third, had returned to his homeland, and he had managed to regain his nation's sovereignty by slowly forcing his nation's borders back towards these areas. He even fought a bit of a campaign over here to liven up the borders, although the borders didn't really liven up, they just kinda came into existence. Over here we see that the Green Nation took over some of the Heartlands, which would be hard to retake, but the rest was just taken, and over in the south the areas were just given up on, although they would be a small contingent force still holding their own in the capital, which would be a bit of a pain, but yeah. But I'm gonna see you guys next time. Bye bye.